Hey, and welcome to the Trent Tribe Podcast. We're glad you're here. We're going to do our best to keep it uplifting and encouraging while relevant, and hopefully inspire each one of us to reach for that abundant life that God has for each one of us. So let's jump in and get started today. Well, welcome to today's podcast where we have a very special guest with us today. And of course, it's myself and Amanda is here, but we have Gina. Gina, it is so good to have you in here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I can't wait till everybody gets to hear your story, because today we're kind of talking about overcoming addictions and various other things. And your story is very inspiring. And we love it that you're we consider you part of our family, church family, Trent Tribe, everything. I mean, we consider you an adopted one, right? But we're just so thankful for you, and thankful that you are willing to be transparent and share your story, because you are now 3.5 years roughly sober.
Yeah,
But you've had quite a journey dating back several years.
absolutely.
And there's a lot of things that have just come full circle that we'll talk about today. But we want to just open it up right here off the bat and just say, you know what? This is your story. Let's start. How about it? Can we? Is that all right?
All right. Well, never really understood addiction. My dad was an alcoholic, grew up that way, but I never understood it. I never understood why or anything about it until the year 2017 in April. I was on a trip to the river and on my way home, and had been about 10 minutes from home, and my boyfriend at the time had told me, he said, just put your feet up, hon, we're almost home, and relax, and just look at your Facebook, we're almost home. And so I did. I put my seat back and put my feet up, and as soon as I did, I could see lights coming through the windshield and dropped my phone, and at that moment I had a car come up through my engine, and that was pretty rough. So he was drunk driver, and I had gone to the doctor and was sent to pain management. They said I was way too young for a surgery, and that they preferred me to be on pain management for about 10 years. And that's a long time.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was pretty disheartening, I would say, because, I needed something to relieve my pain, but he wasn't willing to do anything to actually change it. It was just a Band-Aid. And until I was prescribed over 300 pills a month, I became highly addicted to narcotics.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when that wasn't enough, I started drinking alcohol, which I could never even stand the taste of it. I would plug my nose for it. It would take me a year to drink a bottle of wine. My mother-in-law would come every couple of months, and, a whole year, I just never had the taste for it. But my pain was so bad that I was drinking with the pills. So it became really bad for several years. Until, 2 years later, so in 2019, they finally, after 3 doctors, decided that they would do a knee replacement on my right knee. And I got a little bit sober for that, and ended up having that knee replacement. But I was living in California at the time, and it was really rough. I wasn't working, and my addiction continued to grow further and further. And so at that point, I had an offer from my dad to move out to South Carolina. He had a house out here and said that I could come out here, sober up, get better, get my kids out here. And we would go from there. And then moved out here the very last day of January of 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened, and my dad couldn't leave. I was still drinking in my room constantly. It's actually really hard to become an alcoholic in South Carolina when you have to time when you buy it. And I know that's kind of funny, but in California, you could buy it any time of the day. You have to plan to be an alcoholic out here in South Carolina.
It's funny and it's not funny all at the same time, right?
Right. But we'll shoot forward to Mother's Day of 2020, and my dad was still here. And that was my first Mother's Day since I was 17 years old without any of my kids. I have 4 kids. And it was one of the hardest and most depressing times of my life at that point. My dad was still there at the house, so that was rough. And I was, closet drinking. He didn't really know what was going on. I would drink till I got in the driveway, and then like eat dinner, and then go into my room and finish drinking till I would pass out. And I was drinking 99 grain alcohol. It
Wow.
was rough.
Yeah.
So Mother's Day rolls around, and really depressed at that point, and I didn't feel like I could go on anymore. I didn't want to live anymore. I missed my kids. It was the hardest time to be away from them. And I went out to my car, or my dad's car at the time, and I knew that he had something in there that could help me end my life. And I had decided to, at that point, I just prayed and prayed, and I called the 811, I believe the number is. Different number in different states, but I had some really nice people come out, and I told them, that I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't want to live anymore, but I didn't want to die, and I needed help. And they had police came, ambulance came, all of that, and my dad and I were not in a good place at that point. And he told me that depressed people don't believe in God. That was his exact words to me as I was being escorted out
Yeah.
to the ambulance. And he told me I had 30 days to pack every bit of my belongings, which was a 3-bedroom house. Everything I've had since I've been 17, I was on my own.
Mm.
And I went to Beaufort Memorial and was, of course, on the psychiatric ward for a little bit there.
Right.
And I was trying to plan where I would go and what I would do. And had a best friend of over 20 years offered to rent me a room, which was a godsend.
Yeah.
And I had put everything I owned in storage, which it's still there. Still there 3 years later. Most of it, I would say, but I didn't get sober yet. I was still drinking. I would go to work, come home, go to my room, drink and drink and drink, and I just I couldn't do it anymore. I just really couldn't do it anymore, and I needed to be around family. And my mom and I were kind of estranged at the time. We had some things happen in our past, but we got past that, and I moved to Hampton. And when I moved to Hampton, I found a little church called Lighthouse Church, and immediately became like I felt like, it was family. I was still not ready to get sober yet. I was on the fence about it, still very depressed, didn't really know just how to handle being a parent so far away from my kids. And I'm grateful that my kid's dad and I, we co-parent super well. He's one of my biggest supporters of my sobriety.
Right.
I would say he's one of the first people that I told about what was going on. And he's always been very supportive with everything. Had some really lowest of lows, still continuing to drink. I would go to work, sober up to be at work, come home, sit in my driveway, drink 2 or 3 double shots of this alcohol, and then go and eat dinner, and then drink until I passed out every single night. It was rough.
Mm.
Probably my lowest of lows was sending my 70-plus-year-old mom to the store to buy alcohol for me.
Mm.
And that was one of my biggest eye openers. And I had knew that I needed help, but again, here comes Mother's Day again, and super depressing for me. And
Right.
checked into a hotel and completely out of my mind drinking, and called who I thought was a friend, and they ended up leaving me there at the hotel 3 days later that I was drinking. I wasn't eating. All I was doing was drinking. And next thing I know is the ambulance is there, and
Mm.
he's not there. And I'm just kind of worried about, like, where am I at? What's going on kind of thing. And he ended up telling one of the people in the room above us to wait 15, 20 minutes until after he left, and called 911, that I wasn't coherent.
Mm.
And so to the hospital I went, and from there, came home and then got myself into treatment and have been 3.5 years sober now.
Congratulations.
Completely off the alcohol, completely pain medication. It's nothing that I do anymore. Right now, I actually have to just because my story did go full circle.
Right. Yeah. Because you, back when you first started this story, your feet went through the windshield,
Yeah, my feet went through the
including
windshield.
your legs, your knees, and stuff. And you messed your knees up.
I did. I
Um,
absolutely did. Though, a week before that, I was roller skating with my kids.
you know,
Very active, always active with my kids, running around baseball games, all that.
yeah.
But, moved out here, no insurance, trying to find a job, trying to keep a job, being an alcoholic. And ended up, I work for a outpatient drug and alcohol rehab. I'm a certified peer support specialist, able to help people with their addictions now.
Hmm.
And I'm definitely not ashamed of my journey or my story or not even saddened for the whole fact of moving out and leaving California just because I wouldn't have met the people that I've met. I wouldn't have been able to do the things I do. I wouldn't be in a happy place. And so it's great. I got the job and I had insurance and finally worked up the time to have time off to get my other knee replaced.
Hmm.
And a few days before my knee surgery, it just kind of hit me like, this is totally full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's closing this chapter for me. And people would ask me, are you angry at the person? And I'm not, he had problems too, and he was a person.
Hmm.
And addiction doesn't discriminate at all,
No.
at all. And so I am now, today, actually 2 weeks, 2 full weeks post-op from my surgery.
Yep.
And was a little bit scared about having to take medication, but I'm pretty confident in my sobriety, and I knew I needed to take some to get through
Well,
the
yeah.
first couple of weeks.
Kind of tough.
Yeah,
Kind of
with
tough.
physical therapy, but I'm I'm just happy to be alive, and I'm happy to be able to share my story. And when sometimes when you tell your story, you're the key to somebody else's prison to where they can
Yeah.
finally just say, you know what, I'm not alone. And you think you're alone and you isolate when you're an alcoholic
Right.
and all of that. And it adds to the depression and it adds to all of that. But I'm grateful for my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are grateful too. And we're grateful you're doing really well from your surgery from 2 weeks ago. You came in here on a walker, unassisted from any of us, and you looked almost like you could probably do it without the walker. But it is only 2 weeks.
Yeah, I
So,
keep trying to compare myself and watch videos of
yeah.
people in their recovery, and I need to remember I need to give myself grace.
Yeah.
And
So before, if you go back to 2017, it was April 2017 when that happened. You had not done drugs or any of those things up to that point, had you?
no,
Yeah, and that's so we hear so many people. There's a young guy that we got to know recently real well out of Florida, and his mom brought him up here to Hampton and stayed several weeks because he had a really, really bad addiction. And to the point that Narcan was involved several times to bring him back, and it was really scary stuff. And just for his life's sake, I mean, she said, well, I gotta do something. Something's got to change, and they're desperate. And when sit down and talk to him about his story, it started with a car accident, and it started with prescription drugs, and it's not here to say I know that there's a good use for them,
right.
but we hear from so many people that have that same initial beginning. Well, it started after, and it'll be some kind of incident, and it's really scary to think because that can happen to anybody.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like I kept telling myself, well, I'm not that kind of addict. I'm not that kind of addict. I don't do this or that. And I mean, basically, I was taking legal heroin.
Hmm.
That's what that is. And it
Hmm.
destroys families. It destroys people.
Yeah.
And I mean, I really just wish there was something that was truly non-habit forming, but as of right now, there's really not.
Right. Yeah. Well, to be able to handle that kind of pain, that's tough. So a lot of people don't know this about you because they're listening and they're hearing you for the first time. Is not only are you in our church family, but 3 years ago we started Celebrate Recovery at our church, and you started with Celebrate Recovery, which you had already started your sobriety journey at that point, but it certainly came at a good time because you had really just started right before that, right?
Right.
And so here we start Celebrate Recovery. You jump in and get started with it, and go through trainings and this stuff and all this stuff. And now you're one of our Celebrate Recovery leaders, and it's wonderful because you've got Jess, who is our ministry leader, who is a totally different experience than yours.
Right.
And now you got you, who's had this experience with addictions and all this stuff, and and you got different ones like, Jim is one of our men's leaders, which has struggled with control issues, or what he calls the God complex
Right.
of trying to be in control of everything. I come from more anxiety and religious trauma, so we really are kind of almost getting all the bases covered. we're a well-rounded bunch of thugs. That's
Right.
what,
Just a bunch of misfits.
so. But isn't it wonderful though to be able to turn that story around and see God use your past, your story, which you never intended to happen at all, and here it is. And I just wonder if you could speak to somebody listening today that may be in that same boat, or maybe they're a parent of somebody, an adult, their adult child. I mean, what would you? I mean, like, what do you say?
Well, I actually am the parent of somebody in recovery as well. My son is almost 7 years sober, and I didn't understand addiction there either. But I would just tell them that there's no shame. There's no shame that addiction does not discriminate, and that just keep praying and to keep trying and to keep coming back. But just the most part, never stop sharing your story because somebody else can help you with something. And just to not be ashamed, because I held a lot of shame as a parent. I held a lot of shame as somebody addicted. I felt like, I'm a horrible parent. How could I do this?
Mm.
But we can't do it for anybody else. We can't get sober. Our kids can't, if our child is addicted, they can't get sober for their parent. They can't get sober for their child. I couldn't get sober for my kids. We have to get sober for ourselves, and we have to want it. And that's the biggest part, is just don't stop. Don't ever stop trying, because whether it's the fourth time, the first time in treatment, the eighth time in treatment, it's still, trying to better yourself, and anything is better than nothing at all. But I would say the most part is to stop feeling ashamed for it, because yes, it's our fault. It's our fault that we continue in our addictions, but it's not our fault that, you know, well, I mean, we shouldn't hold that shame. I should just say
Right.
it's that
Right.
that's the most important thing for me, is to not hold that shame, and just to reach out
Mm-hmm.
to people who have dealt with this before, because they can help.
Right. Well, I think that's key, the shame, like you're talking about. I mean, really to hang on to the shame. I know we may not look at it this way, but it's almost a sense of pride. I mean, you're hanging on to something you need to let go of, and maybe you don't feel like you're worthy, maybe you feel like people don't care, maybe you feel like that, you just can't be real with people, or otherwise they're going to judge you, or whatever it is. But I actually find quite the opposite. I think we work these fears up in our mind, and we hang on to things, don't we? And if you got people in your life that do that, then you know what? You don't really need them in your life, do you?
Right.
And for like one of the things you said your dad said to you was about depression.
Hmm.
And how was it he worded that?
Depressed people do not believe in God.
Right.
That I had 2 weeks to get my stuff packed up and leave.
That's really an incredible thing. And I mean, I know that maybe he didn't mean it the way that, but a lot of people do have that viewpoint. Well, gosh, if you're depressed, then how could you know? I mean, how could you be a believer? How could you be a Christian if you're going through depression? And I actually used to think the same thing until I actually went through a small season of depression.
Right.
And I was like, well, wait a second. I don't even know why I'm depressed. Like, no reason to be depressed, and it was very difficult to shake.
I have a question
Yes.
for Gina. I know you mentioned that part of your addiction was isolation. And I know for lots of people in recovery for numerous different types of issues and habits and hangups, that isolation is a part of that. I know the enemy, I think it's a tool or a weapon that the enemy uses for all of us, kind of like a warfare, a mental, spiritual warfare to isolate us. And what would you say to someone who finds themselves isolating themselves right now?
I would say no matter what, get up, take a shower, and get out that door. No matter how much you don't feel like it, you need to get up. You will feel better once you get out. You will feel better once you shower, but you need to get up and you need to go. And no matter how much you don't feel like it, that's just the devil telling you something different.
Mm.
Because I know how extremely alone I felt. And I felt, that it's only me. I'm the only one with problems. How could anybody even want to be my friend? And it was just continuous buildup of lies that the devil would tell me. But I just needed to get up and get out and continue moving forward.
And don't you think for most hurts, habits, and hangups, the first step is to remove the isolation,
Yes.
to connect with somebody,
Yes.
even if it's the librarian.
Right.
Yeah,
Anybody.
Anything.
right. Yeah.
poor,
Yeah.
poor librarian. But
Yeah.
anybody, go to a church, go to a library, go to a store, but remove the isolation.
Remove it, definitely.
And
And
what would you say to someone who loves someone who's isolating? What's something that is helpful?
I would say no matter what, you need to pray for them. Send them the I love you message. Send them your worthy message. Show up. Show up. And, they may not want it for themselves at that point, but at least tell them that they're loved and that they're worthy because they need to be reminded that they're worthy. You need to be louder than the devil in their ear.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, louder than the devil in their ear. That's something. Because I guess a lot of times if we send out messages and then there's no response, we think, well, there's no point anymore. But actually, there may be. It may be getting there. It's just, it may take some time. If we stop, then it's definitely not going to help, is it? So, well, that's a great question because isolation is such a big deal for so many people, and especially if somebody that's dealing with anxiety, and depression and things of that nature, and they're like, well, you know, I'm not offering anything good to any group, any body of people, and it's tempting to isolate yourself. And I guess all of us have experienced that, haven't we? And maybe some to a stronger degree than other people. And but there's no healing in that quiet, in that secret place, is there? I mean, you gotta get out of there.
Yeah. And I know a lot, like for me, I was shy, I was shameful, I was a lot of things, but like one of my goals that I've made myself months back, because we do have a lot of new people come to our church all the time. So I made it a goal to introduce myself to 3 people. But the very first thing I say is, hey, I'm Gina and I'm in recovery. I used to abuse alcohol and drugs, but I go to this church. Nice to meet you. And that's the first thing I say. And they're either blown away or, it's like, okay. But it's like, here I am. You can like me or you can not like me. But this is my story and I'm going to share it. And I'm going to not be afraid. And maybe that's like, wow, it's okay to say we're not okay because we're trained. Well, I could say, it's that you don't tell people outside of your house what's going on. You don't tell them that you have problems. Everything is perfect. And that's kind of the way I grew up, is that we had to do that. But you know what? We're not perfect. And I really actually, the first time I came into Lighthouse, and I connected with one of the music people who I absolutely loved. I don't know if I'm allowed to say her name
Yeah,
on
you are.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Miss Andy Lynn, and absolutely loved her and saw her and connected with her. And the very first things in my head was, oh my gosh, I wish I could love Jesus like she does. I wish I could sing like she does. This girl is up there and look at her. She's got no problems. And then I was invited to celebrate recovery that night and saw her. I'm like, she's as messed up as me.
In
you
the,
know,
in a weird sort of way, there's so much comfort in knowing that, right?
Right. It is. It was like, you know what? I am not alone. And a lot of us think how alone we are, but it's that devil just telling us constantly how alone we are. But I made that immediate connection. And sometimes you need that look, that nod, that something from somebody. And I know that, I mean, those are my people there at our church.
Yeah, you're ours. Yeah.
And, you know, we all have our stories and they're different, but we all have a story.
Yes.
And so that's what we have in common is that you know, to be born in this world means to be born into trauma, to be born into, you're an imperfect person born to imperfect parents. They're going to give you a reason to sit on the couch and talk to the counselor. Absolutely. No, there's no such thing
No.
as perfect parents because there are no perfect people. You know, there's no perfect world. There's no perfect situation. And so we all have stories. We all do really have hurts, habits, hangups, and issues, which is what we say Celebrate Recovery is
Yeah.
for
Right.
anyone, which means it's really for everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we just got a question from somebody this morning. Actually, two different questions. It's pretty much the same question, two different people that were talking about that. So how do I go about getting help with anxiety or depression in Celebrate Recovery? And I said, show up. Like, that's what you do.
It removes the isolation.
Right. Just show up. I mean, you know, like, because we're so used to hearing AA or NA, and we're taking both of those and putting it in CR and saying, oh, by the way, if you don't struggle with alcohol or substance, then you're also welcome, you know, which is what we have found out about 70% of the people don't struggle with the addiction. They struggle with anxiety, and people all over the place are looking for help.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because God has wired us to connect in community, and we will find healing in that community. But the one thing the devil wants to do is isolate us. And if he can convince us that we are no good, that we are not worthy, and all those things. And the truth is, I'm not worthy. But you know what? There's Jesus, and he makes me worthy. And you know what? That kind of relieves me too, because also I don't have to outperform you. It doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
Yeah, hey, you never had an addiction. Fantastic. I give you an applause. You're still no better than I am.
Exactly.
So, you know, as we close this up, though, the thing that I'm sitting here thinking is that while you were going through your 3-4 years of, you know, a very dark time in your life, God knew the plans that he had for you. You know?
Absolutely. In little old Hampton.
All right. And it's crazy because you think, oh, I'm going to send her to Hampton because there's so much going on in Hampton, right? Same for us, you know. Well, you know, anybody that doesn't know, we don't have a Walmart, you know, which I think we're okay with that. You know.
Amazon Prime really helps with that.
Right, exactly. So
Hey, we do have a couple Dollar Generals.
We have a plenty of Dollar Generals. They're walking distance in every direction.
Right, where there's a pile of dirt, there will be a Dollar General. So, right. But I'm just thankful. I'm really thankful that for your story and the fact that God never give up on you, and that you came out of that, and God's like, okay, now we're ready to really do something. And then if you hadn't have chosen to go that route and pursue your relationship with the Lord, then your story might have been wasted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because the devil, he's going to waste it all, you know, and he wants to make it worse and waste it. But God can take that story and say, I ain't going to waste a drop of that story. And we're going to turn around, and somebody's listening to this today. Oh, man. Because, you know, we may be making this podcast for one person. And that one person may have been through the same thing you've been through. And God knows the incredible plans that he has for them. And they may just have received the very thing that they needed to hear to begin that journey, you know?
Gina made it, and you're going to make it too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And there are going to be people that, just like your story, Gina, there's going to be people in your path that are going to be blessed by your story, and they're going to overcome because of the motivation they received from what God has done in your life. So just, it's remarkable. So I don't see how anybody can sit and bottle things up anymore. There's got to be some transparency.
Right.
You know, there's got to be some real talk, going on. There's got to be that place. And as you've said, Amanda, isolation is not that place.
No.
It's just continuing to live in the dark. And as we talked about Sunday in church, when you live in the dark, you make decisions like you're living in the dark.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of times in recovery, people say that you're only as sick as your secrets. So
Right.
go ahead and tell everything.
Yeah. And you're like, well, people aren't going to like me. But when I went to that men's group for the first time in CR, and I was like, I'm pastoring these guys. And I mean, like, how am I supposed to lead? How am I supposed to have respect of anybody if I'm honest? And I did, and it was nothing but fantastic. I mean, it was like, the bond, it was just ridiculous. And I think it goes back to like what you said about Andy Lynn, is when you found out that she wasn't perfect is when you felt better about her.
Right.
You're like, oh, okay. Well, gosh,
Yeah.
you're screwed up too.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, nonetheless, so we greatly appreciate you being with us today. And we always close out with prayer because that one person, and I don't want to put the pressure on you. I didn't ask you, but would you like to close this out in prayer today?
Sure.
Absolutely. All right, Gina, go at
Andy
it.
Lynn always puts me on the spot.
Oh, well, you have been trained. All right.
Dear Lord, I just ask you, just if you can just open the ears to even one person, Lord, who hears this podcast today. I just ask you, Lord, to let them know that they're worthy and let them know that there's no more shame and that people love them. They need to just, I don't know where I'm going with this because I babble when I pray, but just know that you are not alone and that you are worthy and that you are a child of God and that you can do this. And I just ask you just to stop isolating and to come out and hear what has been said today and just keep moving forward, and you can do this. And I'm so thankful for being here today, God. I'm so thankful for my pastor, so thankful for Miss Amanda, Lord, and I'm so thankful for Hampton and this church, and just I'm thankful for my journey, and this is all I got. Amen.
Amen.
And
Amen.
love you guys. Thanks for joining us today.